identified when they adopted that plan was that there are a number of parks in the city.
This is the May 2018 meeting.
I hate to say neglected, but haven't gotten as much attention as
Quite a
some
lot
of the
of
other
people
parks
here.
in Shoreline. So you may remember that in 2006, the voters passed a parks bond that made some great improvements in Cromwell Park.
We
and
had to
other
move
parks
from
around
upstairs
the
to
area.
downstairs to accommodate all the people.
Didn't get any funding from that parks bond is James Keogh. And so what we've done is we've looked at about 8 parks across Shoreline that didn't get funding from the 2006 park levy and have really not had any significant planning or thought about what those parks should be, what they should develop into the future. And so the past several months, starting last December, we've done a series of public workshops looking at designing those parks, James Keogh being one of them. Now, how many have actually been to or go to James Keogh Park? It's on the freeway. It's actually probably the park that is most seen in the city of Shoreline because you can see it as you drive along I-5. But the idea is it's a completely neglected park. Through this concept design process, we've worked with our design team in the community to look at some paths that circulate around and through the park, an upgraded children's playground, some public art, a multi-sports court, which is an old tennis court that is grown up with weeds right now, a small community garden, we're focused on a mid-sized community garden at this location, some improved parking. Okay. It's at the end of 168. So if you go down Meridian, go towards I-5, go east on 168, go all the way to the end. There's a, you can drive to, I'm not sure what that north-south street is, but you can't actually drive all the way to the park. You have to park backside by the barrier and then walk into the park. It is west of the freeway, just immediately north of the transfer station. So I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. We'll come back if you have questions. I put Richmond Highlands Park not because it's in Meridian Park, but it's relatively close. It's the other closest park, an accessible park. We didn't do Ridgecrest, but it's on the other side of I-5. This one is relatively close, and we're looking at some significant changes to Richmond Highlands. There's a recreation center there. That's where the teen programs operate out of. Looking at developing a fully accessible, ADA accessible playground in that location. In addition to the teen programs, we also do our specialized population programs out of the facility that's in the Highlands Rec Center. So putting in a fully accessible playground, reconfiguring the ball fields. There are 2 diamond sort of softball little league fields, reducing that to 1. Putting in a rain garden, some more picnic tables, a sport court, multi-purpose sport court, basketball, pickleball, volleyball. So making it a more interesting and lively park to help support the programs that are in the building. The part of the development of the Parks Recreation Open Space Plan is we look specifically in potential park acquisitions in and adjacent to the light rail area substations. So this is a potential park acquisition area map that is focused on Meridian Park. I'm going to talk about a couple highlights. If you see at the top, the A, that is vacant property on 185th, just west of Ashburn. And so there, if you drive by it, it's a property that's overgrown right now. Through community meetings, people identified, some of you identified that as something we ought to look at as a high priority acquisition to expand the park system. C, sorry. See in the bottom left, it's a big area that we identified as a gap. So right in the southern little part of Meridian Park, but it doesn't have the same level of access to parks and playgrounds. And so this would be an area that over the next long term, we want to acquire some additional park property to build another park with a playground, some neighborhood park amenities. We haven't identified any specific properties. We haven't sort of taken it to that point, but we know that that is an area that we want to continue to look at. Yep. So the far south is 155th.
So we're having microphone.
All right, well, I'll muddle through and try to do something.
Maybe if you move one direction, you know, say, okay, far left, and then go to
This
the
is
next.
155th.
Yeah, we can see that.
This is Meridian. This is the Interurban Trail, Aurora, and 165th is just north of the city.
What's the big, red line spot?
This,
Yeah.
that's the light rail line. South Transit.
Oh. That's.
Interstate 5. So, light rail, I-5, Meridian, Interurban Trail.
Can I ask something about A?
Yep.
Have you, looked into that at all? Because that's been vacant forever and they were in a hurry to knock down houses and that one house out there for years and years. And now it's been vacant forever. I'm wondering, is it swamp there or what's the deal?
We have, we've identified it, we haven't talked to the property owners, we haven't done any additional research at this point to figure out sort of how, what the amenities or what it might be like.
So all you know is it's empty lot.
Yep.
Oh, well. We all know that.
Have you identified the property owners?
Yeah,
So one person.
it is, I believe it's one person. The B on the upper right-hand corner, so that is the center is the intersection of 185th and Northeast 10th. So it's 2 blocks east of where the light rail station will be. On that corner, there's a Rotary Park, which is just a really small pocket park. It's a little green area with some azaleas on it and some picnic tables and benches. Most of the property around that is the lawnmower repair shop is owned by, that property owned by Seattle City Light. And, you know, the power lines, high voltage power lines run through that area. So we've identified that as a possible area to expand Rotary Park. In some agreement or ownership transfer with Seattle City Light, taking advantage of the little green space that we have now, knowing that the area around that is going to become more dense. And then the possibility of purchasing some of the private homes adjacent to that property to make it a more sizable parking space.
Started coming from the RDS station.
Community gardens, uh-huh.
What, and that right by that. Stack of weeds there, a lot, and.
Are you talking about May?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, we haven't started to design it, but you're right, I'm sure when we get into that stage, that will be. Yes, I'm sorry.
Is the light rail station going to be adjacent to 6th Avenue Northeast, is that right?
The light rail station will be, at 185th, between 8 and.
I'll show a picture.
Okay, she'll show pictures more detailed of that. So you want to want to touch really quickly on Mom and Bob. Many of you may have come to some meetings over the past couple of years. This is Ronald Bond Park now. The sound transit is going to be impacting wetlands on the east side of I-5, just south of 155th. So they have to mitigate the impacts that they're going to have on those wetlands. So they're going to fill those wetlands. They have to create new wetlands somewhere else. And it needs to be, ideally, it's someplace in the same drainage basin. And so their choices were to, they could put money into a pot, King County wide, and that money could be used anywhere in King County to mitigate for the wetland impacts they're having on the shoreline. Our conversations with them led us to run the Bond Park as a high priority for them renovating this park into a wetlands that then mitigates the impacts that they're having.
It's already, that
They're gonna expand the wetlands that's there, and so the bog is wetlands. There's the periphery around the bog, close is wetlands. What they will do is expand, add about a little over an acre of wetlands at one bog park.
So all those homes that are currently south and adjacent, all along that side, they're gonna be,
Nothing happens to those homes that are adjacent. This is all within the park. This is all within the park.
what's your issue? 175th is at the top.
Yeah, 175th is at the top.
Oh,
So where there's the green area, where there's the artwork, the orange X's, that's called the KISS. So that gets relocated, and that area becomes a wetland. They move the KISS, they keep the shelter on the shoreline where it is, keep a view corridor and keep access, so the public still has access to the bog. But then the rest of the park, which is frankly wet most of the year, we have a difficult time maintaining it. It didn't get a lot of use anyway. This is what that park wants to be. And we would never be able to build a playground. We'd never be able to put any other improvements in that park just because of the drainage issues. So this worked out well. They'll do improvements to the arboretum, the trail through the Rotary Conifer Arboretum, all of their costs. And so they'll start that project. They'll move the KISS this summer, I believe, and then actually start the renovation of the park in 2019. You mentioned Darnell Park, Arbor Day celebration on November 10th. Darnell Park is, it's a struggle because of its location, its inaccessibility. You can only get to it off the Interurban Trail. So it's south of 165th off the Interurban Trail. We did some cleaning of blackberries right adjacent to the trail so you could improve the sight into the park. In November, we'll be working with a nonprofit group named Earthcore, who will come in and do some trail improvements, do more invasive removals. Hopefully get a lot of you to come in and help volunteer at our Arbor Day celebration in November to try to bring that park back to a little bit of a better life. Finally, I'm talking about the Aquatics and Community Center feasibility study. The shoreline pool is on its last legs. It's almost 48 years old. It was built as a forward thrust pool. You're familiar in the 1970s, King County voters voted on a bond measure called Forward Thrust. It built 24 pools around the county, all about the late 60s, early 70s. Shoreline pool is one of the last two of that vintage that is still standing and operating. The operational costs continue to go up. We aren't sure what's leaking underneath, and so it needs to be replaced. It's on, the city owns the building, but it's on land owned by the school district. And the school district has not formally told us, but informally told us that we probably need to do something else with the pool. The community center, Spartan Community Center, is in the old high school gym. which is the building closest to the light rail station that's been upzoned. It's been upzoned, and so the school district will probably redevelop that property sometime in the next 5, 10, 15 years. So we need to relocate that recreation center. So we went through a feasibility study through 2016, 2017, and the council set a goal for to open a new facility by 2022 and have a measure asking the voters if they want to build a new facility by 2020. And so we are, so we did a feasibility study, looked at potential locations for the new aquatics and community center, identified the green areas. So the big green rectangle in the middle is centered right here. So it's between 170th and 195th, between Midvale and that's the town center area. And so we identified that is someplace in there is best location for the aquatics and community center. We're looking at specific sites over the next several months. So we're on track to do a next stage of design so that we're ready to, for the city council to decide if they want to put something on the ballot.
The city right now is ready to take my home to the aquatic center. So that's not a city site.
The one along Stone? Yeah. Well, yes it is, and if you're willing to talk about that, then we can talk about that. I've been, since we're still in negotiations with property owners, I've said the specific site. If you want to say where your house is and say that we're in those negotiations.
And then we started negotiations.
Okay. Storage court and that.
So it's hard to hear the conversation on this side of the house.
I'm sorry, I was
The microphone is in there.
I was dancing around the question of have we picked a specific site, because we're starting for the new aquatics and community center. Because we're in negotiations, but we haven't finalized negotiations, and so out of respect to the property owners and such, I just haven't named the site. This gentleman owns one of the houses that we're negotiating with, and so his house is on Stone at about 180th. So that's where we're looking at putting the new aquatics and community center. You heard it here first. Yes. Yes. Will the new aquatics and community center be like the Linwood pool and aquatics center? I said yes. Go to the next. So we did do a feasibility study. We looked at the site. We did some preliminary designs for the center, mostly wanting to look at what the operation and maintenance costs would look like for a new facility. And with the new facility, with the new types of pools and slides and that kind of stuff, you can generate more revenue. And the expenses, the cost of operating the facility, it'll be higher, but it goes down because you have much more efficient energy systems, you have much more efficient water circulation systems. And so we think, at least our preliminary feasibility study says that we can operate a new 82,000 square foot facility cheaper than we can operate the existing recreation center and existing pool. So over the next several months, we'll be testing that a little bit closer. We'll be doing some new financial analysis. So I'm going to wrap up and talk about the Park Funding Advisory Committee. Yep. There are two? Yep. a lap pool and then a fun pool.
And I hope the lap lanes are like that.
Okay.
YMCA.
YMCA is not,
cheated.
yeah, okay. Good to know.
Hockey rink? What is that?
That's a basketball.
Oh.
Basketball.
How do you put in apartment with the pool, wires?
Yeah. Yeah, so there's the pool is, 2 bodies of water, 2, maybe 3 bodies of water. The gym would be a double gym, so 2 full-size basketball courts. There'd be community meeting rooms. This program has a senior center space, not a dedicated senior center, but space that would support a lot of the senior center programs that go on now in the existing senior center, which will eventually, again, I don't know when, maybe 5 years, 10 years, but it'll eventually be, have to be relocated from the Shoreline Center as well. So senior programs, probably a weight room, a physical weight room, some dance rooms, and then a staff office. No sauna? Maybe. We've gone back and forth on the sauna. I think that will be the next stage of design, and a lot of it's going to come down to cost. You know, what you know, how much can you put into a facility and still have it be something that the taxpayers want to pay for. And this, the parking is off the picture by the gym, and these are the amenities. I wouldn't get too tied to the design and where they're at. This was done without any idea of where a site would be. Now that we have a site, then we'll be able to start designing to a site, trying to look at things. Do we need how much parking, surface parking, parking garage, that kind of stuff.
Are these, drawings on the website somewhere where you can look at them better than me?
They are. And they are at, if you go to shoreline.gov/parks, under administration, there is a planning page. I'm not sure if it's actually called planning, but there's a projects and plans section that has the aquatics feasibility study.
Might your input on this have included a look at what's called the Commonwealth Pool in Victoria, BC? Perhaps one of the most attractive pool operations in the Northern Hemisphere.
Okay.
It would be quite informative to know about that one.
Okay, great. The Park Funding Advisory Committee, so we will have a citizens committee. The city manager will appoint a committee late this summer that will start meeting in September. And we'll meet through, probably through the end of February or March, and look at funding questions around aquatics and community center, as well as park improvements. And so I showed you the concept design for Keogh Park. We have those for Ridgecrest, for Rivers Bog, for Shoreview, for Hillwood. And so the question will be, how much will the city council want to ask, and how much will the voters want to fund as far as park improvements? Just an aquatics community center, not aquatics and community center, and just park improvements. And so the advisory committee will help us think through what really makes sense to ask the voters to put on the ballot. I say put things on the ballot. We're doing a comprehensive funding analysis. So we're looking at grants, we're looking at partnerships, we're looking at other ways that we can fund these improvements, not just automatically thinking that the voters Shoreline are going to pay for everything. We're going to look at other ways, but honestly, we'll look at that, and that'll be a substantial sum, but it's not going to be enough to pay for everything that we're talking about. So my job, the Parks Department job, is to give the city council and give you the best options that we hear from you. So we're hopefully feeding back what we hear people want and give those options to you. Then ultimately it'll be the voters and taxpayers of Shoreline to decide, how much of this vision do you want to pay for. I've probably gone way too long because I know there's lots of other.
May have missed your name and your position.
Okay, sorry. Eric Friedley,
Freely?
F-R-I-E-D-L-I. And I'm the Director of Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Services. Thank you.
My name is Miranda Redinger. I'm a senior planner in the Planning and Community Development Department. Myself and my director, Rachel Markle, will be sharing some of the big picture stuff. I'm going to give you an intro. She's going to talk about specific development that may be coming to your neighborhood. Then we're going to talk a little bit about, we're going to segue into transportation planning. So we have our senior transportation planner here. We have our city traffic engineer here. So I realize any of the topics we're going to touch on tonight could be a whole 3-hour meeting. So we're going to try to get through some more of the presentations so you can get the full picture, and then we make ourselves available for specific questions, whether they're group or individual. So we will make time. But first, I'm going to give you kind of a big picture refresher course. This is the 185th Street Station sub-area. The light rail will be coming to Shoreline in 2024. There will be 2 stations opening at the same time. The station at 185th is north of 185th.
Right.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah. Oh, why is this not showing you? It's on my screen. That's how this is supposed to work, but it's supposed to change by what I'm looking at. Let's try.
In preview mode where you see the next slide on your screen, maybe?
I was. You're the tech expert in your room.
Almost had it.
Saw something.
Or just take down the.
Oh. No. Oh, there we go. Yay!
Thanks, everybody. So, big picture, zoomed out. This is the 185th Street Station sub-area. Here's 185th, I-5, light rail line will be coming up the east side of the interstate. The entire station at this point, including the 500-car stall parking garage, will be located here on the east. There was some initial designs where they were showing it on the west. So we went through a long process, I'm sure many of you remember, between 2013 and 2016 to talk about land use in these areas. Now, rather than go into the full long story, I'll just remind you that this is the zoning that was adopted by council. There are 3 types of zoning. They are all called mixed use residential. They are differentiated by height limit. So this kind of mauvey pink color is mixed use residential 35-foot height. That's the least intensive zone. It is meant to be a transition zone between existing single family housing and the more intense development right near the station. 35 feet is the height limit of single family homes since before the city was a city, even though most of them were built out at 2 stories. That's the height limit. So while you can allow more dense types of housing in this zone, it is the same height as a single family could be built to. Stepping up, mostly along the 185th corridor, is mixed use residential 45-foot height zoning. So think of this as like a 3-story building, and then a 4-story building would be the 45-foot height. It allows for a mix of uses, including some townhomes. That's why you're seeing townhomes going up along 185th. It also allows for business on the bottom with residential on top, and that's where we hope to see the cafes or the local neighborhood serving businesses. Then this stuff right at around the station, it's called mixed use residential 70-foot height zones. And this is what is commonly referred to as transit-oriented development. It's where you get the density to support the ridership in the businesses and the other kinds of improvements. So, it's also, there are 3 phases when this zoning will kick in. Phase 1 kicked in September of 2015 when council adopted the sub-area plan. Phase 2 kicks in 2021, and phase 3 kicks in 2033, which was 10 years after the station was originally scheduled to open. So council thought that this allowed some predictability, some phasing of growth, and Rachel's going to talk a little bit about the projects that we're actually seeing come in for application. But in terms of just a general kind of philosophy, what we anticipate in the near term before the station opens is continued townhome development, because we previously did not have a lot of zoning that allowed for townhomes. So we think there's a pent-up demand for people who can't afford single-family houses, but maybe want to get into ownership or live close to the station. So that's what we're likely to see in the near term. And then there are folks that are working on getting properties together and coming up with development plans. And so we've had some pre-development conversations. So really, really high level, really short preview. That's kind of the basics of the zoning for this area. I'm happy to talk more about what uses or styles or any specific questions. This is an interactive map. It lives on the light rail severity planning page. The quick link for that is shorelinewa.gov/lightrail. There's more information on another light rail related page regarding the permitting process and where they are in that process, and that's where you can find designs from previous open houses, etc. This map is interesting in that you can click on a parcel, it will zoom in, it will give you some basic property assessor data. If you're looking at something in a phase 2 area and you click on it, it will tell you not only what the current zoning is, but what the future zoning is, what phase it's in, and when the zoning will change. So it's a handy map if you want to zoom around the neighborhood. And that's why I pulled this up in case you have specific questions about specific areas or properties. So with that said, let's see if we can get the slideshow. Ta-da! Okay. Now, my director Rachel Markle will talk a little bit more about some of the specific development applications, and then, as I said, we're going to get into corridor strategy, which I imagine you're interested in, and then some transportation.
She's doing that. Hi again, I'm Rachel Markle, and I'm the Director of Planning and Community Development. And since tonight's topic was what's happening in Meridian Park, what's going on in terms of development, I thought it might be interesting for you to see a little recap of what's happened in terms of actual permitting and construction since the rezone in 2015 to this area. So let me get to that slide. This slide shows you the commercial, multifamily, and mixed-use permits that have been processed from 2015 to present in your neighborhood. The first excerpt of the Meridian Park neighborhood are the applied permits, and each of the little yellow pins represents a permit application in your neighborhood. A lot of what you see along Aurora, those are tenant improvements up and down Aurora and the businesses there. You see a small cluster of pins around 175th, right around here. That would be Trader Joe's, City Hall projects, things of that nature. Then you see a smattering of pins on either side of 185th. Those are likely to be both Gateway Center tenant improvements, and then some of the townhomes that you're seeing now, projects going in and more underway. Then the issued permits, same pattern. You see a few stray, I'll call them stray marks, stray pins throughout Meridian Park. Those are likely townhome developments. And then in terms of what's actually been finished since 2015, the final map, most of the pins are still on Aurora, the tenant improvements, and then there are a few scattered along 185th. So that's what's actually happened in the past 3 years since the rezone has occurred. Let's talk a little bit about what's been completed, what's under permit, and then what we are hearing of in terms of future projects. One of the projects, it seems to me like it was done a lot longer than 3 years ago, is the Aurora Micro Apartments at 170th and Aurora. Those have been open for a little while now, and they're completely filled. It seems like all of the time is what their apartment manager was telling us. And if you remember, these are like apartments. They have 8 studios per pod, and they share a kitchen and dishwasher and washer and dryer, and they're really efficiently designed so that you can really see yourself even living there in terms of having a place to hang out and also have and do a little bit of entertaining even on the large common areas and rooftop grilling area. And the rents there start at $795. It's not technically low-income housing, but I believe it does serve that need for some people.
Well, I'd say the price point is probably what would qualify as low-income housing. You know, the median income in King County is still $103,000, which means that the affordability levels get pretty low. So 80% is like $1,300. So I would imagine that this is, you know, 50%. It's priced for college students. A lot of the folks that go to the community college, I think, who are expected to be tenants.
And then we also heard people who don't live in town full-time, travel a lot, people who are pilots, also people who are, like I said, a lot of the airline industry people stay there, which I thought was sort of interesting. So Vale Apartments, you probably have no idea where this is, by the picture at least, but Vale Apartments is going to be at 179th and Midvale Avenue. This one has been permitted and they're slowly getting started with construction. They moved some dirt recently, but they are permitted and expected to build 7 levels of mixed use, 195 units, and about 3,500 square feet of commercial area, and have 2 levels of parking. And then Paceline, of course, if you just turn around, you can see Paceline now. It's well out of the ground. It's been permitted. It's 6 stories, 223 units, or was that 21? I'm sorry, I don't have my glasses on. Street level commercial space. In fact, they are looking to get a temporary certificate of occupancy as soon as possible so they can start finding people to lease that space. So they're working hard to finish up so that they can occupy that building. Now we'll look at some of the townhome projects. This one is in your neighborhood and it's on Stone Avenue and it's nearing completion. It's 2 3-story buildings, 7 townhouses in all with attached garages. And then the city of Shoreline, I believe, is very lucky to be getting an early learning center in the Meridian Park neighborhood. Of course, this will be located next to the Meridian Park Elementary School. Here are a few permits that we'll talk about that are under review. So we don't have much information on them yet. That's why I include just the 4 pictures. This one that has a basic rendering is at 224th and 180th. It's 6 townhouses and 2 buildings, and those townhouses will be about 1,800 square feet. And then there's another project proposed of 5 units, again 3 stories, at 1719 185th. In terms of commercial projects that are under review, there is a Shorewood self-storage, and that is going to be at 167th and Aurora. It's been a vacant site for years, and there'll be 5 stories, about 130,000 square feet of storage space. And I don't believe that color is what will be approved. That's a little bright for our new design standards, but this is the picture that they submitted for their application, so we'll see if that is an approved color. We have several projects in the pre-application stage, and what a pre-application is, a developer, some developments require pre-application meetings and other people choose to have them. And what they are, they're when your project is very early in the design, you come in and meet with city staff to get some information about the feasibility of your project and how permitting will go. Not all of those projects come to be. Developers sometimes choose not to apply for those projects, or they just delay them. So if you see something here, it doesn't mean it's definitely coming, but it is interesting to note that all of the pre-applications are townhouses that are located in your neighborhood. So I won't read the specific addresses, but on 2nd Avenue Northeast, there's 13 townhouses and 3 buildings proposed. Again, 3 stories, that seems to be the going look and feel for townhouses. Stone Avenue North, 4 units and 2 buildings. North 185th Street, 19 townhouses and 6 3-story buildings. And then the picture, the basic sketch there is of a project that might happen on 1st Avenue Northeast, 3 duplex townhomes, again, 3 stories with a little garage.
Where on First Southeast?
18322, so 183rd-ish? Some more townhomes. This one's a much larger scale project. This one's at 185th and Meridian, 22 townhouses and 4 buildings.
You know, I do have a question.
Sure.
I live on the 185th, and already it's hard to get around the driveway or across. Right? Could put that on the corner by a soft light. How are you going to manage all the traffic?
Those are really great questions, and that is what we do look at when we permit development, and we are looking at protecting and reducing the amount of access from 185th Street. And in some cases, a development may not be allowed or possible at the size they project at the pre-application stage. It has to meet our traffic standards, our level of service standards, our safety standards, so that's all under review. We have the same concerns you do about that.
I'm gonna talk a little bit more about that as soon as she's done with the development slides, so there'll be more information.
Because like I said, we have the same concerns and goals perhaps that you do in terms of making sure things are safe and that people can access their existing developments, future developments safely. Yes?
So all these units that I see, these developments are covering the whole lot, and there's not one stitch of grass or a tree left anywhere, so are you gonna tear down all these nice old trees in this town? I don't wanna live here anymore if you do that.
Here.
Yeah, I mean, there's no drainage, there is no runoff water, you have everything out, every square inch, in apartments and housing. How are you gonna have drainage in there? Where are the birds gonna live? Where is the wildlife gonna live in this town? There's no room for any of that, the way I see it.
There are, in the MUR 35 and 45, the lot coverage is 85%. In the MUR 70, it is 90%. It is at a more urban scale, but the balance of the city is at 50% in the residential 4 and 6 units per acre. We do have an amendment going to the Planning Commission currently regarding tree retention and replacement in the MUR zones. And so that is a concern, that is something that the Planning Commission will be looking at too.
About it, the way these things are designed, there is nothing that preserves the old trees and any kind of landscaping around the units.
There are landscaping requirements, but they will be new and they won't be as grand as the existing trees, and they'll grow up over time, is the idea.
It's hundreds of years to grow. How are you gonna replace that?
Couple things. One, there are aggressive stormwater standards. When this area was developed, when all of Shoreline was developed, they filled in wetlands and built suburbs. So at the time, there were no standards to make a developer build a sidewalk, and there was no standards to make people figure out where the stormwater was gonna go. That's one of the reasons we have so much flooding. So while we create more impervious surface, you think more flooding. However, now that we've got low impact development standards, the developers have to handle their stormwater in a much better way. So even though the buildings are larger, the stormwater is handled much better, and
That's
we
where
are,
it's gonna go, it's all concrete.
it's not all concrete, but
It is.
they have
The
to
way
get
it
a little
looks, it's
more
all
creative
concrete.
if they wanna maximize their building footprint. So we still have requirements that they have to meet, and if they can't get the lot coverage because they can't fit all of the requirements, you know, but maybe it'll be more rainwater harvesting on rooftops. You know, there are some innovative strategies. One of the strategies is we mandated a level of green building in all of the MUR zoning. So every new building that's built in the station sub-area has to be registered as a built green, which is a more localized program, 4-star level. The council also last April passed an incentive package to get deeper levels of green buildings. So what we'd like to see is the buildings functioning more like trees and taking on more of the ecological function that some of the trees that, yes, will come down, you know, and there are ways to think about what we do with the trees if there are some receiving sites in parks, or, you know, we do care about the trees. And we're working with Salmon Safe organization right now to find the best ways that we can improve salmon habitat and stormwater and water quality in the city. We aim to become the first Salmon Safe certified city in Washington. So there are environmental regulations, and it is a high priority.
I have something to say about these buildings. I live right across the street from the 5 townhouse units that on Denver Avenue. People have only been in those units for several months now. About 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, they already had to rip up the sewer line, let down the sidewalk where the sewer line was, dug a hole to China, because 2 of the units, the toilets were backing up on it. So, you guys need to have better inspectors, higher standards, tougher regulations for these buildings.
I'm into that, and all parking.
My question is, how do you get buildings to function like trees, turn my carbon dioxide into oxygen?
There are a number of functions that trees perform. Believe me, I understand. Get that oak tree and accountant. I'm well aware that there's many ecological functions. There are buildings. Passive house is one that purifies the air. I won't get into all of the design standards, but the living building in Seattle called the Bullitt Center is the greenest office building in the world. It functions like a grove of trees on the land. Okay, so we're gonna move on a little bit with the presentation, and then we can get back into questions and discussion later.
And I'm almost done with my part anyway, so I'll just end on what's going on in neighboring North City that you might be interested in. And this is when we talk about what's coming right now for Meridian Park for the next 5 to 7 years until the station opens. We do expect more townhouse development to come, and that the larger scale apartments and commercial would come later. That light teal area that Miranda showed you all around the future 185th Street station, that would be more like some of the development that's coming right now to North City. North City has a permit issued for Arabella 2. It's right next to Arabella 1 on 180th Street. It's 81 units. And then the Shoreline Development Company is developing the former North City Post Office site with 243 units, and that permit for the building is under review. They're working on the foundation right now. And then there'll be a new fire station on Northeast 180th Street. And then some more commercial uses are coming. I'm really excited about Seattle Granola is coming to the Old Brown's Coffee site. That was a really nice remodel that was done a few years ago, and unfortunately either it didn't make it or chose not to stay. But Seattle Granola is delicious. If you haven't had a chance to try it, they sell it at Central Market, and Myrna has it there coming to that location. And I really do expect that we'll see more local, hopefully local commercial and some jobs coming to areas like North City and to the areas around our light rail stations that we've rezoned for higher density and a mix of commercial uses. But we don't expect that to come until the station opens. We might see a development, we believe, within 2 years of the station coming, so that it's under construction while the station is under construction. But that does end my story on what's happening in terms of development since the rezone and what we expect to happen in the next few years in terms of types of development you might see in Meridian Park. Thank you.
Grounds there, where the post office was, that big apartment building in there. I read, I don't know if it's in Shoreline News or whatever, but they were supposed to have like businesses on the first floor, but they just said they're not gonna do it. How can you get away with that?
Having commercial on the first floor is not required, but you are required to build it to commercial standards. So what usually that means is it's built at 12 feet instead of something lower, the ceiling, so it can be converted to commercial when the market is ready for commercial to come. I'm sure you've seen other apartment buildings when you're in other cities, even here for a while at Echo Lake, where the commercial is built and is required to be commercial, and then no one moves in for years and years. So we were trying to avoid that scenario and let the market drive when the commercial would come, but we wanted to make sure that it had a look and feel and could be used for commercial when that time came.
So is this gonna be empty then, on the first floor?
No, it won't be empty. A lot of times they use it for their leasing office, for their gym, for their common, their party room, I guess for lack of a better word. Or they could find a tenant and rent it. They haven't indicated that that's what they're going to do.
Question, did you say earlier that the light rail runs along the east side of I-5 from 184th all the way to where, 145th?
To Angle Lake south of SeaTac. So this is, our section is part of Linwood Link Extension. So the funding package that we were in is under ST2, which was approved in 2008. So it took the extension from downtown through Capitol Hill, University of Washington, Northgate's under construction now, our 2 stations north to Linwood. The next package that was approved in ST3 a couple years ago will expand it further north to Everett, to Ballard. Part of the link that's on our timeline is the east link to Ballard. Bellevue.
And since the light rail essentially bisects Meridian Park, are we gonna be made into 2 different neighborhoods?
No more than you were by the interstate coming through. A lot of what we talked about was that this is a community that was bisected by the interstate in the 60s. How do we bridge the connections? How do we make more connections? How do we create multimodal corridors, which is a great transition.
There won't be any at-grade crossings or conflicts, if you will. So all the streets that kind of go east-west across the city won't conflict with the light rail line like you see maybe in other places south of Seattle where they have it kind of running along the street grade. They've had some not so great experiences with that, so they won't be duplicating that here. It'll all be either elevated or in some cases even underground.
Yeah. So the station at 145th is elevated. The station at 185th is at grade with the freeway.
Is there not gonna be a station between Northgate and 145th? I've never heard of one.
Roosevelt is between Northgate, or is that, I can't remember.
No, Roosevelt.
130th, but that's
Not yet, so
package yet. Yeah.
they're leaving that option open for the future by putting a spur in. So they're not precluding future station, but it's not in any funding package to date.
It's a long distance to expect people, cause there's gonna be places to park at 185th, how about 145th?
Both of our stations are gonna have 500 car stall garages. So how many of you have seen this picture before? Okay, good, because this was the concept design that was developed with the sub-area plan. So again, zoom back up for a second. So with the sub-area plan, what you do is you analyze multiple zoning scenarios. You do a couple thousand pages worth of environmental analysis to figure out, you do population projection based on the zoning, you figure out what the impacts of that growth would be, and then you have to identify strategies to mitigate it, to make it not have a negative effect. And this is done across a wide range of things, from housing traffic, transportation, economic development, natural environment, a number of factors. And then as development comes in, Kendra works with developers to figure out what the traffic impacts and how they're going to fix those. So you tie the consequences of development and make the developer responsible for fixing them preemptively before the system breaks. So what we did in the scenario was to come up with a concept that we could use to analyze, that we could run through traffic models, that we could put numbers to about trips, given population and zoning, the traffic that's expected for the light rail station. We use Sound Transit's environmental work to build on. So there's a lot of number crunching and a lot of documents. If you're interested in those, they still are all available on the webpage. But we needed a design scenario to play these numbers against. So this was the concept that was developed, and it's a traveling in each direction, a center turn lane, and because this station is going to be really well served by transit, Sound Transit predicts that a huge percentage, somewhere 80-90% of the trips are coming from buses. We're going to have at the 185th station, Snohomish County system terminating, as well as Metro terminating. So it's going to be well served by transit. You don't necessarily want the bikes in the bus lane in this scenario, which is how the road is currently striped. So the original thought was pull the bikes off of the road, put them on the sidewalk in a multi-use path with an amenity zone for planting and ample, probably more than we need traveling space. So the concept was to create a connecting corridor that goes from Aurora and Town Center, where we are now, down 185th to 10th, and then up 180th to connect to North City. And this is so that the existing businesses and the existing, where there's infrastructure for more dense development, could handle that. Now, there's a number of pieces to this. I mentioned that it's really important for buses to keep their congestion down. It's critically important to create spaces, safe, inviting spaces for pedestrians and for cyclists. So that's a huge component of this design concept. However, this is not the final design concept. This concept showed needing a little more space. On 185th, we were projecting about 10 feet on each side. That's not to say that the city has decided that we expand the road 10 feet. What we need to do is run that scenario, compare it to other alternatives that will be determined through a public process. So I realized, we had a lot of public process when the station was going on, when the rezone was happening, and then we went internally and figured out and made our master plans about how do we get the park space to accommodate the growth. Well, we adopt an impact fee, so the developers have to pay into a fund so that we can acquire property for park space and improve park space that we have. We're doing transportation planning, surface water planning, a number of more internal documents. We're going, all those master plan processes were public, but the one that we're about to start, hopefully in the next couple of months, is called the 185th Street Multimodal Corridor Strategy, and that means we're going to take this design, we're going to come out and talk to you about what you want to see on that road, where you live, what the important things are to you, how we weigh those things against each other, and then we're going to come up with, have a total of 3 designs to compare against each other, and then we're going to select one of those designs, and then we're going to move into strategizing about how to make that happen. Now, developers are going to be paying they'll be building those improvements. So there probably will happen in chunks. There are a number of capital road projects, including 145th, competing for city dollars, and we're applying for grants feverishly, but we've got a leprechaun whisperer in our grants coordinator, but there's not a lot of money coming from the federal government right now, as you may imagine. So I digress. Anyway, point is, stay tuned to Current. You will get mailers. We will have pop-up events and signs so that when we get started on this corridor strategy, everyone can come and talk about what you want to see in that road, and we'll talk about strategies to keep the traffic reasonable. Yes?
Is the transit center going to move to 185th from Aurora Village, or will there be 2 transit centers?
It will not move from 185th. There are conversations with the various service providers about the best place. If it moves, where potentially, there's a park and ride on Aurora, but they're trying to streamline service. so that they, you know, that they've got their standards for how far apart the spaces are and what, you know, site conditions need to be met for them to be successful. But, so we don't know yet, but that is something that we'll be continuing to work with the transit providers and will be part of this corridor strategy. We want their input, we want to synchronize with their planning and their timelines for service improvements.
It is very likely that there will be some transit restructures with the opening of the light rail station. We don't know exactly what or how that's gonna look yet, but it's highly likely that transit will be restructured to carry more people to and from the light rail stations as the major connector to downtown, so.
In order for what it looks like now, what we see, the width of the road that it is now, they will have to widen that, in order for motorbikes and such, and pedestrian. So when folks are acquired, you know, to build buildings, then the developers are not responsible to add that space on the sides of the road.
Yes,
But what about
the general principle you're saying is correct, but again, the fact that we need to widen the road is not a foregone conclusion. There are other strategies where we can safely protect the bikes and to have bus access that may not involve widening the road at all. So those, at least one of the alternatives that we're going to examine in the strategy, we haven't figured out what those are yet. We just know that one of them at least needs to not show a widening of the road. So we can weigh that against the other options in terms of functionality and all of the lovely math that Kendra does. In terms of developer improvements, once we get those standards, the developer whoever redevelops will be required to build those standards. Right now, in order to not have anybody build into a space in case the road needs to be widened, we have what's called a setback from the property line. So until we figure out those standards, nobody's building into that space. But we don't know what the space requirements are yet. That is the exact cross sections and designs will be determined through this public process that will get started very soon.
I'd like to ask everybody to hold their questions. So we're way behind. It's 8:30 now. People are leaving the room. We have 2 more presenters to go. So if you could hold your questions and then talk to these people at the end of the meeting, that would be helpful. Thank you.
And so with that, thank you, Gretchen. We'll transition over to Nora. I'll just show you that this is the corridor. Remember I talked about the Z, that was the design concept of 185th to 10th to 180th. We also, during the suburban planning, had a lot of people say, what about Perkins, what about Perkins, what about Perkins, what about Perkins? So we heard that. We're having the consultant analyze designs for Perkins as part of this project. And now, Nora Smith. Sorry, delayed thing. I don't know who I'm talking about.
Good evening. My name is Nora May, and I am a transportation planner here with the city. And this is all queued up. I have 10 slides. I'm going to try to move it along, but I want to talk about planning for sidewalks and shoreline. And we'll start from 2 years ago. So in 2016, in response to the desire for better sidewalks, council allocated budgets for both an ADA transition plan and a sidewalk prioritization plan. The ADA stands for Americans with Disabilities Act, and the ADA transition plan is about identifying where there are deficiencies in our existing sidewalk network and creating a plan to repair and maintain them. The sidewalk prioritization plan is about looking at our citywide planned new sidewalk network, and then together, the ADA transition plan and the sidewalk prioritization plan, the vision is to create an accessible and connected pedestrian system. And so just looking to ensure what I'm seeing is what you're seeing. This concurrent project schedule just shows how those 2 projects fit together. The ADA transition plan started earlier. It's a 2-year process, and the expectation is that they will be delivering that plan on how we are going to repair our sidewalks by the end of this year. And the sidewalk prioritization plan It's a one-year, project that's just wrapping up. We, expect to be wrapping up in June. In fact, I'm going to be presenting on June 4th to council the final prioritization plan. And just kind of indicating two highlights, we had open houses in the fall and then also recently in March, I think March or April, and those followed up with online surveys. So a real centerpiece to this process has been a citizen advisory committee that has been meeting monthly and sometimes twice a month since last June. They're made up of 15 members from a broad range of neighborhoods across the city with diverse interests and skills. And they formed 4 subcommittees to really look at the 4 key components of this project, which is the prioritization process itself, communications, funding, and sidewalk treatments. And they have helped us co-host open houses and had dinner meetings with council. And their main focus throughout the year is really analyzing how to prioritize and fund both the repair of existing sidewalks and the expansion of our sidewalk network. And through this process, their motto really has been, how can we create access and accessibility for all? And this is just a really great collage of, you know, what do we mean by all? You know, the little kid making their way to school, somebody in a wheelchair, someone with visual impairment, etc. We need to be creating that connected system for all. And so this is like a little bit of history that's foundational to the prioritization plan. In 2011, in our transportation master plan, we have what we call the pedestrian system plan. And the green lines on this plan, it's really showing the vision of 80 miles of new sidewalk to really connect you and everyone to key destinations throughout the city. And this, while we put this vision together in 2011, we haven't been able to implement much of it other than there's an outstanding example of Aurora, that's 6 miles, 3 miles up and 3 miles back of sidewalk, and some other 10 other sidewalk projects that are part of this green line network. We haven't really been able to do anything substantial because there hasn't been a dedicated funding source other than grants and leveraging with other capital improvement projects. So one of the things that we're doing now is really taking a hard look at not only reprioritizing the plan, but looking for revenue sources for that. This is a little bit of a look at then and now. So in 2011, we had a criteria-based system for prioritizing that 80 miles of sidewalk. And the criteria was based mainly around connectivity and leveraging capital improvement projects, so basically like growing dollars, right? And now we're looking at really filling out the deck of criteria to prioritize our system. And so with the help of the Sidewalk Advisory Committee and through working with the public, we've added safety and looking at specifically where there needs to be more separation between people that are walking and the vehicles on the road. So looking at streets based on speed, volume, collisions, and also where there's opportunities to have paths or trails for that separation. Another key criteria that we added was equity. This aligns with our council's goals for equity, and it's looking at serving the communities of most need. So the very young, the children, senior adults, people with disabilities, communities of color, and other underrepresented communities. And then we have proximity, which is really about where is their walking distance to these common destinations that people want to get to, the parks, the transit stops, the schools, etc. And the last one is about connectivity, and that's looking for the opportunities to close gaps on our sidewalk network. And what I wanna get across tonight is that this is, it's a transparent and data-driven process. So we build the criteria around what matters, and then we use data to map that. And I'm just showing 4 examples of by safety. One of them is we have the data to show where there's been collisions for the last 5 years in our city, and where you see those weasel marks, that's where they are. Equity, this map is showing where low income communities are. So the deepest purple is the low income. Proximity, just one example, we've taken all the parks in our city and put a quarter-mile radius around those, and then connectivity is closing those gaps. And then from there, our sidewalk committee helped us put a point system with those criteria, and we created this scorecard. And then taking that scorecard with the use of GIS, we basically reprioritized that 2011 pedestrian system plan that I was just mentioning 5 minutes ago. The one 80 miles that we haven't accomplished much, we reprioritized it based on a more robust criteria system. And the red lines are showing where there's high priority, yellow is medium, and green is low. The blue lines are our existing sidewalk network, so it's important to understand the context of that. And I just want to point out, because this is about Meridian Park, I just want to point out that 175th is a high priority project. And then also Ashworth, I think north of Echo Lake, is coming up red. And then probably because you would ask if I didn't show this, we want to get our arms around how much this all costs. So we take a rough average cost and apply it to those priorities. And on the high priorities, there's 26 projects, a little less than 20 miles, and the cost would be $112 million. So quite a bit. Let's see if I have any more slides. I don't. Traffic. So that's a real overview. I'm here to answer questions, or we could move on to our traffic engineer, and I could answer questions at the end. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Alright, so I'm Kendra Didinsky, I'm the city traffic engineer here at Shoreline, and I don't have a whole lot of slides for you, because my program is mainly rooted in operations, so I'll be here mainly to kind of answer questions and maybe touch on some of the components that the prior presenters talked about. But just to get started, I wanted to show an effort that we're working on right now, which is identifying streetlight deficiencies throughout the city. We've heard year after year as part of our citizen survey that streetlight deficiencies are one of the primary concerns for residents. And so we took a good look at that, again, using kind of data systems that Nora was speaking about earlier. And we're currently looking to put out some public information here within the summer. Likely this, so it says up here, it's worth noting that the plan doesn't inherently provide funding for the lighting, and what's important to note is that the cost of the lights themselves is not necessarily the installation, it's the ongoing electrical charge associated. So we have to have the budget in place to support the ongoing electricity bill as we add more lights to our system year after year. So as you can imagine, that compounds over time, not only because we're adding more and more to our system, but because, as you all know, as ratepayers, Seattle City Light likes to increase their rates occasionally, so it's something we have to account for in our budget. But this plan does, similar to what Nora just talked about, it helps us to prioritize where the installations should occur based on a bunch of different factors like safety, she was talking about volumes of cars, that sort of thing, with the overarching goal for traffic safety being to light locations where there has been a history of collisions or where there's kind of a more likelihood of
of collisions occurring, particularly related to pedestrian collisions. There's a real strong relationship between pedestrian collisions and hours of darkness, so that's something we want to take a careful look at. So the next thing I was going to talk about is one of the core kind of deliverables of my group, which is the annual traffic report. We talk about this yearly with council. It gives an overview of traffic trends in the city, including collision data, traffic volume, speeds, that kind of thing. In addition, it reports out on transit ridership and to some degree pedestrian and bike use. So kind of a wholesome or holistic look at all the stuff my group covers. So what I'm showing you here is just very draft. We will go to council on June 25th with this information, so look forward to that. There's a real comprehensive report associated with this data. But since we're here talking about Meridian Park, I did post some of the pedestrian or bike related collisions that we were seeing in 2018 occur. So in 2017, it looks back at the prior year. But the 2017 collisions total for pedestrian and bicyclists were 29 throughout the city, and the ones listed below are the locations they occurred in your neighborhood. So we typically look at each one of those collision reports individually when they come to us for the pen and bike. Those are important target areas for us, since obviously pedestrian and bicyclists are at more risk in terms of what the damage is if a collision occurs. So this report is pretty important to us because we use it to inform not only planning documents like our transportation improvement plan, and in order to pursue grant funding, which we just kind of finished that season out and applied for multiple millions of dollars in grants for transportation safety improvements. But it also drives some of our capital improvement program. Probably worth noting that will go to council as well here, probably, I think in August, if I'm not mistaken, or I do recall. You can look to our website for that. If you just type in CIP, Shoreline CIP, you'll be able to find the schedule. But part of what that is based on is driven by these safety trends in the city. So it all kind of comes full circle when we look at projects related to safety. I'd love to answer questions, and usually people like to ask me lots of questions about traffic in the city, but just hitting a little bit on some of the development we talked about earlier. I think it's worth noting, I didn't hear Rachel or Miranda mention per se, but a lot of the development you see will be installing frontage improvements, which equates essentially to sidewalks as part of their project. And while it's sometimes minimal, it really is a pretty important investment in the city. And when you start stringing those developments together, especially in areas of higher development, like the light rail sub areas, it really does start creating a network for the pedestrians, bicyclists, and even vehicles in some cases. The other thing to note is that any development that's of a larger size does come through our office for review, and we do check their traffic generation essentially against our city standards. What I think is important to note is the expectation you all may have about what our standard is. A lot of folks feel like any change at all is unacceptable beyond what they experience today as delay. And in fact, that's not our level of service standard. Today, what you see when you're driving around out there does not represent an unacceptable level of delay, so there's still some capacity left in our system in order for us to accommodate development. And that's partly what our transportation impact fee is based on. So if you're not aware of what that is, it's kind of part of the 2011 transportation master plan that Nora talked about, that modeled the whole city, modeled to some degree the planning efforts that we were accounting for, and looked at when things are anticipated to start breaking down and built a fee structure around that for development to pay into so that we can start building projects out. And as part of that, 175th corridor is a major component of those TIF, those transportation impact fee projects. So we will actually begin design this year on 175th corridor, which is great. I think it's a long time coming, obviously.
But we have both supportive grant funding as well as transportation impact fees to help fund that project, which is good news. Funding is essential to projects being implemented. So in part, development is paying into those particular projects, which, you know, that the growth that we're seeing, and that, you know, inherently there's some delay associated with it. We are accounting for that on the back end through both the traffic analysis that we review and we make sure meets our concurrency standards, but also through collecting developer fees for transportation improvements. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. I can talk a little bit about light rail as well and field questions on that. I think I noted that, you know, there won't be any bisecting of east-west. I think that's a really critical design feature that we got behind early on in our city to make sure that we wouldn't have any safety issues related to pedestrians trying to cross, you know, 175th corridor, 185th corridor, and making sure that it really didn't function to be another barrier in place between those east-west neighborhoods. And as well, I think probably worth noting that one of the projects Nora's been leading is a feasibility study to have an additional pedestrian bike facility along the rail alignment that helps, again, kind of carry people through neighborhoods and adds as a benefit instead of, you know, as just being a monument, you know, the rail itself acting as a barrier. So probably another important note. So that's about all I have, but I'm happy to field some questions on various categories. Yeah.
Okay, you talked about new buildings, redevelopment. How much of that is solar? Is the city making it a requirement that buildings come with solar? And if not, why not? The same thing for streetlights. Are the streetlights going to be solar?
Well, to talk briefly about streetlights, there aren't any real good industry standards for solar streetlights at this point, and the ones that are out there and available are relatively new, and businesses have a tendency of going belly up. So when we invest heavily, like businesses in particular, because technology changes a lot. So for example, the retrofits that we've done on Aurora to convert them from what's called HPS, high pressure sodium, to LED. That business in a short time frame, 3 years, has gone belly up, and we had to scramble to find a company that would provide a new retrofit kit for us for when those need to be maintained. It's very expensive. So investing in any new technology it always comes with sort of a trade-off, right? There's a higher price typically to pay at the implementation, and there can be a higher price to pay in terms of maintenance. The benefits of getting those environmental attributes out of it are clearly a good thing, but there are always trade-offs associated with new technology.
Well, and with the LEDs, in converting the streetlights to LEDs, we've dropped our carbon footprint substantially. Our municipal carbon footprint went down noticeably. So that's an environmental benefit of this kind of trade-off. To your question about green building and solar, the current requirement is to meet a Bill Green 4-star. That does not have a mandatory solar. What that does is to say, you know, to meet this level of certification, the building needs to be 15% more energy efficient than the most recent code, or to level up, you need to be 30% more efficient. You know, so each level that you're striving for is more stringent certification system. So we also, as a city, ran a Solarize campaign. I believe that happened through 2016. We got 117 kilowatt capacity installed on roofs and shoreline. A lot more folks showed up for meetings, for informational sessions that we have. There's a trade-off between trees and solar. So a lot of folks, shading, a lot of folks based on the trees in their yard. And
We can't put panels on the house.
Yeah, some of
Too
you
much
can't.
shade.
Yeah, I think that's, we
Right.
have shade trees too.
right, so we don't want to make it mandatory, because then that's not, you know, that's creating a
What about like
conflict.
for the city buildings, what is the plan for, like you had said, that there's, you know, like electricity costs but like the school district of Bellevue, right, they're like building out all their schools, like they're passing net metering, they're collecting more energy than they can possibly use, and they're giving this money back. Like, what is the city of Shoreline doing about that?
So I'll just say personally, I get really excited and geeky about this kind of thing because I went to school when William McDonough was the dean of the School of Architecture where I went. And if you've ever heard of cradle to cradle or waste equals food or any of those reuse design concepts, he told me when I was 18 that a building can function like a tree, and I said, this is what I'm doing with my life. So just know that I'm harassing everybody about the solar panels and the level of green. Like I said, we've got, Eric can tell you how I've already given input on the new aquatic facility design and how we've got high aspirations for that. So like I said, we can't mandate. California is mandating solar panels. They are the first place that started saying, and every new, we've considered solar ready, which means you put in the conduit, you make sure that the roof spacing will accommodate solar in the future should a homeowner decide to do that. A lot of solar cost analysis. We do life cycle cost analysis for the building, so we are accounting for the upfront costs of green building and efficiency and power generation what the return on investment for those are. So that is something that we look at, and this is a LEED Gold building we're sitting in right now, solar hot water on the roof, solar PVs on the parking garage, electric charging stations. So it is something that we are proactive about, and we want to see, we need to walk the walk, but we're also requiring developers to kind of upgrade. We want a specific type of development. If we're going to redevelop, we want it to be energy efficient, way more so than what it's replacing. Same thing with water.
And so what exactly are you not requiring in new buildings, especially new commercial building, which is gonna generate, more carbon? Why is the city not requiring solar on those new buildings?
I think that's a great thing to suggest to the council.
Why
I would.
This is not a new idea.
The council actually has on our work plan this year to start the feasibility for a citywide green code of some sort, adopting a standard for all commercial and multifamily buildings. And whether it be LEED certified or any of the other programs, it's a point-based system. So you have to achieve a certain level of points, and being solar does give you a lot of points. So someone might choose to do solar, but they might choose to do something else that is equally as energy efficient.
Yeah. Well, I'll also give you another example, building on that, is the Passive House is a certification program that may become part of the mandatory option. So we've got mandatory in light rail, we've got council's asked us to consider expanding the mandate to commercial zoning and maybe allowing a couple of program options. Built Green primarily certifies residential, so for the commercial we might need a different system. So Passive House makes it super energy efficient. You tighten up that envelope. Then you throw some solar panels on top and you become net zero and net positive. So, and then you could be eligible for that certification. So what we're trying to do is a little carrot, a little stick. You have to do this much. If you start doing this much, then we'll give you're eligible for, if you need to design your building a little differently. Our codes aren't exactly meant for buildings that work like trees. So sometimes, you need a little departure. Sorry, Rachel, were you finished?
Yes, and I would say as an outsider of that whole discussion, our planning department has been talking about this with the planning commission and council for many years. So this has been an ongoing, I think, interest at a policy level for quite a while.
And what is house light rail?
Electricity.
And how's that electricity?
Hydropower.
What?
Hydropower.
Why is it solar?
Well, our hydroelectricity is actually fairly efficient in this region. In comparison even to solar, if you're talking about the global footprint, but the trains that Sound Transit runs have almost immeasurable positive benefits to our, environment as a whole, because they're taking cars off the road and all kinds of other things. So I think they have quite a bit of supportive environmental documentation that you can look at. Go ahead.
The speaker who addressed the sidewalk improvement, at the end, she mentioned that the top, moved up to the top priority is 175th improvement. What type of improvement and what part of 175th?
We're not quite sure what the improvements will look like yet. We're gonna be kicking off design efforts in a few months here. So that'll kind of take the first look at what the footprint might be. The limits of that project would go from roughly Stone Avenue, which is where the current Aurora improvement stopped, all the way down past Meridian to the east, kind of tying into the I-5 interchange.
You're talking about the north side?
Both sides. Yeah, it would be the entire corridor.
Okay, so at this point, it's after 9 o'clock, and we need to break the meeting. Some of these people, can stay. Laura has to leave. I have her business cards, and she said you can email her questions. So
I can probably field her questions as well. We work in the same department.
So, I'd ask that the speakers stay a little bit to answer specific questions. The audience is thinning out because we've gone way over time. But I thank you all for coming and for the lively discussion. And I hope to see you at more Meridian Park meetings. So I'll put hand up Nora's cards for those that want them. I'll take it to you.
Well, can I ask one quick question? Does anybody in this room know when Shoreline was being developed, why in the heck they put this extra wide sidewalk on the south? And I have measured the 2-foot wide dirt path that a lot of us have to use.
On
Why did they do
175th,
that?
like, I have the same issue. I've talked to Kendra about it 100 times. She's been on our street. She stood there and has seen it. Like, we've got to do something about it, right? They know it. They just don't have any money, and maybe like with the amount of builders are building here, and the amount of money that is being invested or like being really taken out of our community by builders, they just build and they sell. They take the money, they move to the next spot. It seems to me like there is room for more impact fees, so that we can get more sidewalks and more pedestrian improvements. We can also just slow cars down. It's 35 on Meridian, or on 175th. I was just walking my dog. Thank you for the wonderful sign, right? Like the your speed sign. But 50 miles an hour at noon on 175th down the road. We all know why. Yeah, we all, you know, but it's not fair. It breaks the social contract, and the city isn't doing a very good job of reminding our citizens about the social contract. People walk, there's a blind guy with his blind walking stick that walks around. It's just not okay to drive that fast on the road. They're not gonna put speed bumps in, because that would be ridiculous. It is a main thoroughfare. It's a total corridor to I-5. We should be able to get to I-5, we totally should, but we should have ticket cameras that ticket anyone going over 35.
I'll be proposing that to council this year.
Our children, those tickets aren't enforced.
The speed zone cameras are, yes. The other cities have been very successful in using school zone speed cameras, and it's been a great program and with measurable safety benefits for many jurisdictions, so. Right, you ticket the vehicle. Yes, if they show, but there's enough people to, there's enough people
Well, there's plenty
that
of
do
rule
pay
breakers
into it, so.
and bad actors. The whole thing is we're trying to just remind people of the social contract of the city. We're gonna have 200 new apartments right here. They're all gonna be driving to I-5. You know, so we could just slow down the traffic as a measure till we get a safer, street traffic.
Okay, thank you for
I
coming.
raise my fist at them, they don't seem to slow down.
Very long. They don't even see you.
That's against the law.
However, so we don't have a very robust meetings group. Almost solely contractors to provide services like that. And so far,